The following podcast is offered freely through the Insight Meditation Community of Washington and by Jonathan Foust. To learn more or to make a donation to support this work, please go to www.jonathanfoust.com.
There were some folks who gathered a bunch of 5 and 6-year-olds for a little discussion. And they asked these little kids, why do you think you have a body? And they had a kind of a long and thoughtful discussion about it. And they came to a group conclusion that having a body was really good because it made your head portable. That describes Western medicine really well, I think. We're learning so much about the mind-body relationship. It's really informing so much now of medicine and psychology. And in fact, it's a very, very powerful tool for discerning what's real and what's not real. And that's a little bit of what I'd like to talk about tonight. There are really kind of 4 questions I'd like to explore in the next 35 minutes. One is, what did the Buddha actually say about the body? There are lots of interpretations. The second is, how do you actually practice mindfulness of the body? And the third, what happens if you sustain attention on the direct experience of here and now in the body? Like, what's the result of that practice? And fourth, how do you keep a practice like that going? You may have heard this story. It's kind of an old one, kicking around, but it's a young monk, a novice monk, who joined the monastery, and their job, and he joined kind of these legions of monks who were copying text over. So you'd have a copy of the text. And as he was doing this, after a while, he thought, we're just copying stuff over. We're like copying copies of copies. I wonder if there's any discrepancy between what we're copying and the originals. So he goes to the head monk, this old wizened guy, and he poses that question. Is there any difference, you think, between the hundreds of years of copying copies and the actual original texts? And this old monk says, that is a really, really good question. Let me look into that. And so he goes down to the catacombs, these dark, dingy parts of the monastery, and he's down there for hours and hours and hours. And this young monk finally gets concerned for this old man, and he goes down deep into the catacombs, and he hears this wailing from this old man. And he follows this hallway, and he goes back to this room, and there's this old man who's just weeping. And he's standing over this original text, and the young monk comes up and says, "What's wrong?" And the old monk looks up and he says, "It says celebrate." There are so many additions and changes and interpretations to these core teachings. I'm not a Bible scholar, but it seems pretty clear that much of the Bible was written many, many years later and was edited and put together by different people and different committees. So it's kind of a question, what did the Buddha actually say? And when you look, especially online, you'll see lots of things the Buddha said. And a really fun website to check out is called fakebuddhaquotes.com. It's really good. So much gets ascribed to what the Buddha said when he said nothing like that. It's a very interesting phenomena. We've talked about this a little bit before, but when you look at any church, you'll always find the Orthodox and the Reformed. You'll find those who say we have to preserve the core teachings as they are and be faithful to them, keep them in their pure form. And then there are those who say we have to make this relevant to our culture. We have to adapt this and make it accessible for where we are in our modern age. And that's exactly what happened with Buddhism. The practices went in some directions into the very orthodox teachings. That's the Theravadan branch of Buddhism, where it went into the jungles of Southeast Asia, to Sri Lanka, to the islands, where there wasn't any outside influence for many, many years. But it also traveled along the trade routes, because it was a very powerful practice that people experienced transformation, so they told each other about it, and it fused with the Tibetan culture and took on the animistic quality. It fused with the Chinese culture. It fused with the Japanese culture, with the Korean culture. So I think we could say that the more authentic teachings will be closer to the Theravadan tradition. But even there, they weren't written down for a very, very long time. There was a very strong oral tradition that when you joined a monastery, you recited the suttas, or the teachings. You learned how to just recite them, and that way they worked to keep the purity of them together. And I believe it was about 100 years after the Buddha's death, so that's a couple of generations after the Buddha's death, a lot of the leading teachers in the Theravadan tradition came together to kind of codify the teachings and actually write them down. And there's, in the Abhidhamma, you have sort of the teachings as close to the original as possible, but who knows, there may be some interpretation there. So there are a couple key points that I think everyone agrees on. And one of them is that the body and mind are mutually dependent. That the body does not exist without the mind does not exist without the body. And of course, this has informed a lot of psychology, why lots of people see kind of Buddhist philosophy very much as a Buddhist psychology, because you begin to recognize that your emotions can be found in the body. Your tensions, mental tensions, can be found in the body and transformed in the body. A little bit of hardcore Dharma here is that the physical form, which is referred to as rupa, your physical form, is considered of the 5 skandhas, or what are called the aggregates or independent components that make up who you are. So these 5 components that make up any individual are the material form, your physical body, the feelings that arise from your body, the perceptions you have coming from the senses, and then from there, the mental formations that arise, and then the consciousness that arises out of that. So there's the physical body, the feelings that arise, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, the perception of the senses, the mental formations that arise, and then the awareness of all of that. Like that makes up who you are as this body-mind matrix. And now what's really interesting is the Buddha said, if you look closely at those 5 aggregates, body, feeling, sense, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, they're constantly changing. And none of those should be taken as the self. So you are not the body, you are not the feelings, you are not the perception, you are not the mental formations, you are not your thoughts, and even the consciousness of it. So if you're not those, then what are you? Come back next week and I'll tell you all about it. So, with that, the question becomes, how do you practice? How do you practice mindfulness of the body? And what did the Buddha say? So, here are a few things either he said or those who were very close to him said he said when they wrote this down. He said that awareness of breathing, this little piece is primarily about what's called anapanasati, or the awareness of breath, or remembering the experience of breath. He said, if developed and repeatedly practiced, is of great fruit, of great benefit, and ultimately, it can lead you to clear vision and deliverance. And the path by which this occurs is that breath awareness leads to development of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And we'll talk a little bit about those. And these lead to perfection of the 7 factors of enlightenment. We'll talk about that. And these lead to clear vision and deliverance. So just by watching your breath, you can begin to understand the construction of awareness. You can begin to see into the factors that lead to liberation or happiness, however you might define that. So here are the lines. And you might like to close your eyes for this and just sort of try it on as here in this teaching, a seeker, having gone to the forest or to the foot of a tree or to an empty place, sits down. Keep your body erect and establish awareness of the meditation object. Mindfully you breathe in, and only mindfully you breathe out. Breathing in a long breath, you know, I am breathing in a long breath. Or breathing out a long breath, you know, I am breathing out a long breath. Breathing in a short breath, you know, I am breathing in a short breath. Or breathing out a short breath, you know, I am breathing out a short breath. Experiencing the whole breath body, you breathe in, and thus you train yourself. Experiencing the whole breath body, I breathe out, and thus you train yourself. Calming the breath body, I breathe in. Calming the breath body, I breathe out. So just for these moments, just explore. As you relax and let your body breathe all by itself, just simply notice. As I breathe in, I am aware of breathing in. As I breathe out, I am aware of breathing out. Over the next few minutes, notice when the breath is long. Notice when the breath is short. Can you experience the whole body as you breathe in? And can you experience the whole body as you breathe out? And can you calm the body as you breathe in? And can you calm the body as you breathe out? And these final moments, just again, sense in your own way the simplicity of these instructions. There is a quality of receiving the breath just as it is. And when you're ready, you can let your eyes open, or if you like, you can remain with them closed. The Buddha gave this metaphor. He said, just as in the last month of the hot season, when a mass of dust and dirt has swirled up, a great rain cloud out of season disperses it and quells it on the spot. So too, concentration by awareness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, is peaceful and sublime, an ambrosial, pleasant dwelling, and it disperses and quells on the spot unwholesome states when they arise. Every now and then I find it tremendously helpful to go back and review those instructions because they are so deeply, deeply simple and so not easy. By coming back to the awareness of the body breathing by itself, just as it is, it requires two things. It requires a quality of deep relaxation, to shift from an agitated mind to the experience of natural, effortless breath automatically begins to cultivate a sense of relaxation. But at the same time, it also requires a quality of alertness, to be awake as to when your breath is long, to be awake as to when your breath is short, to be aware of the whole body as you breathe, and to be aware of the calming as you breathe. And this is the paradox of kind of a non-ordinary state of consciousness, to be deeply relaxed and at the same time alert. What we begin to notice, we'll talk about in a little bit, but one thing you begin to notice is how challenging the practice is, how quickly the mind comes in to comment. And then you begin to also see the patterns of the mind, your own particular patterns of the mind, how quickly the mind moves into judgment or aversion, or how it moves off into fantasy, or how your mind is caught in worry and restlessness, unable to settle, or perhaps it settles too much and you find yourself moving into density or fogginess, or how you'll get caught in doubt or self-criticism. It is a very real and sometimes brutal process. We have a week-long retreat coming up next Friday. By the way, there are a few spaces that just opened up in case you feel inspired. But if you can imagine 7 days in silence, and this is your practice, to simply feel the natural flow of the breath. I have not run across anything quite as transforming as this practice, as simple as it is. You start to become aware of kind of what I think of as this chain of proliferation, which I know I've spoken of. You're guiding your attention to the raw, direct, immediate experience of your body breathing. But of course, what you notice is all the feelings that arise out of there. The feelings that fall into one of three categories of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This is called Vedana. At any given moment in your life, there will be either a predominantly unpleasant or pleasant or neutral quality to it. out of that, you have a natural reaction. You'll move into some mental formation. I like this, I don't like this, I'm bored. And from there, as the mind continues to proliferate, it will proliferate into beliefs. And if you're not aware of the beliefs become habits. The habits become your character, and the character becomes your destiny. So by guiding your attention back to this fundamental experience, the raw experience of here and now, sometimes you can kind of catch the chain before it blooms. Or it becomes a way of hopping off that chain of proliferation and returning back to home. And sometimes you experience sometimes this tradition is called insight meditation. Because you are coming again and again back to that fundamental experience of here and now, you develop a capacity for self-observation, a capacity for witnessing what is arising. And you can sometimes catch yourself believing something that maybe isn't true, or catch yourself in a reactive pattern and stop the pattern just like that. Or see a habitual way of reacting, and suddenly you're aware of the habit, and the habit no longer has the same grip on you that it had before. That's part of what's possible. So the Buddha talked a lot about the body, but it's not just about the breath. We speak of the different anchors, different sensations you can use. Breath or sounds, or the felt sense in your hands or the soles of your feet. You can practice awareness of the body in what the Buddha called the 4 positions. When you're sitting, when you're lying down, when you're standing, and when you're walking. They're all opportunities to shift from thinking and the cognitive process to the experience, the direct, raw experience of here and now. So there are specific teachings on breathing, such as we touched into, and they cover some other areas. There are some very powerful sutras, and sutras basically refer to like short teachings that refer to cutting your attachment to sensuality. Some of them are pretty gross. They almost seem as if they're made to have a sense of revulsion toward the body. That's one interpretation. But actually, it's to sort of bring you into a sense of reality, that the body is impermanent. There are teachings on the frailty of the body, very, very specific teachings on the heavenly messengers of sickness, old age, and death. There are meditations on the stages of the decaying of a corpse. And again, you're looking at reality. This is the inevitable outcome of this flesh unit you're sitting in. That it will go these very specific stages of decomposition. And some of these teachings about sickness, old age, and death, and kind of the details of the reality of the body can seem to bring up some revulsion, but again, part of them are about understanding what's actually true, what actually happens. But underneath it is a deeper teaching of the understanding of what's called anatta, or not self. The more you look at the body, and the more you recognize that it is impermanent, the more it brings up an interesting question. That if your body is destined to fall away, then what about you? And this leads to the third question of what happens when you sustain attention on your body as a spiritual practice. And again, not just the breath, but the recognition of impermanence. It was last year my father was dying, and we all came together as the kids, and And I kind of got to be there with him alone through his passing. But as we all came together, we had these thousands of slides from my grandfather and from the family and all their travels. And so a lot of what we did, my brothers and sisters, was we started going through the slides and throwing out the really bad ones and deciding which ones we would keep. Thousands of slides. And it was really interesting to sit by my father's bedside and see these photographs of when he was a chubby little baby, and the photographs of him as this skinny little guy in his army uniform, being shipped off to World War II, and photographs of his wedding and his first job teaching and how happy he was with his kids, and then wearing his cap and gown for college graduations. And then when he grew a beard, and over the years saying how the beard started turning gray, and then pictures of him with the grandchildren, and lots of pictures of him holding up fish, got a lot of those. And over the years, he went from this little baby with a baby face to an older guy with a beard, and eventually, in his Alzheimer's unit, they shaved his beard and shaved his head, and he looked like an old guy with a baby face. And eventually, the photos that I have of him are when his Alzheimer's became advanced, and there was really no one home. Just kind of the emptiness of the eyes. And so there were a few takeaways from that experience that kind of align with some very core teachings. The one was that, and I got to see this visually through history and through present moment, that his body was changing from this chubby little baby to this old man in a wheelchair to finally the life force leaving him. As I sat with him through his sickness and his old age and his death, it became very clear that anytime I was resisting reality, I was experiencing some suffering or some stress. And third was that when he died, where did he go? And as his very sharp English professor brain melted away, what happened to my dad? And these are the three characteristics of reality which are core to the Buddhist teachings. That when you embrace the body as this vehicle for your practice, the reality of living in your body, the first characteristic is called anicca, and that is impermanence. And the teaching goes that anything that is born out of causes and conditions is subject to change. The second characteristic is referred to as dukkha. And dukkha is translated as stress, unsatisfactoriness, unsteadiness, or suffering. That anytime you are arguing with reality, you're going to lose. Anything you try to control, anything you try to push away, anything you try to hang on to that is subject to change will result in suffering. And the degree to which you resist equals the degree to which you will suffer. And in both my parents' case, as they went through their demise, which was pretty long for both of them, I came up with a phrase of wholehearted, enthusiastic cooperation with reality. That was my intention. And it really allowed me to lean into their process, as challenging as it was. This was real. This is what was happening. Could I cooperate with it? And the third characteristic of anatta is this reference to not self. And intellectually, it's challenging to sort of take on. But I like to think of it in terms of back to that teaching of anicca, that anything born of causes and conditions is subject to change. That includes your body. That includes a lot of your beliefs. It includes your thoughts. So anything that is subject to change is not you. And the experience of who you are, in many ways, can only be experienced through direct experience, not intellectually. That you are something beyond your body, and how you might define that will really only be referenced by your own direct experience. I think some of us have touched that at times, to experience the mystery, or just this sense out of time, the language of in the world but not of it, I find quite helpful. So perhaps we can do a short reflection on these three characteristics. If you like, you can close your eyes. Let your attention just simply open to the breath. Let your attention open as well to the sounds around you. I find sound meditation to be a very powerful experience of these three characteristics of reality. As you shift from your interpretation of the sounds to the experience of the sounds, just notice in your own way how the sounds are constantly changing. That if you resist or want the sounds to be different, there's some quality of dissatisfaction, but if you can allow the sounds to be as they are, there can be a sense of ease. And also noticing how the sounds around you are not you. They're simply passing through, just as your thoughts, and just as moods and sensations perhaps are not ultimately you. And letting your attention flow with the sounds, with the sound of the flute and the space between the sounds.
Feel the effortless of the breath. If the breath is long or short, let the body breathe by itself. And you might, in these closing minutes of this evening, take a moment to reflect on this characteristic of impermanence. That this body at some point will fall away, just as everyone you know and love, in no particular order. Sensing the mystery of this incarnation. And you might take a few moments to offer a sense of gratitude to this body, to how it serves, its capacity for pleasure, its capacity for compassion, and for love. Reflecting on this poem by Joyce Sutphin. Body is something you need in order to stay on this planet, and you only get one. And no matter which one you get, it will not be satisfactory. It will not be beautiful enough. It will not be fast enough. It will not keep on for days at a time, but will pull you down into a sleepy swamp and demand apples and coffee and chocolate cake. Body is the thing you have to carry from one day into the next. Always the same eyebrows over the same eyes, and the same skin when you look in the mirror, and the same creaky knee when you get up from the floor, and the same wrist under the watch band. The changes you can make are small and costly. Better to leave it as it is. The body is a thing you have to leave eventually. You know that because you have seen others do it. Others who were once like you, living inside their pile of bones and flesh, smiling at you, loving you, leaning in the doorway, talking to you for hours, and then one day they are gone. No forwarding address. And gently deepening the breath. In your own time, if you like, you can let the eyes open. So oftentimes where I end up with this fact that the body is impermanent and destined to get old and sick and die is a sense of celebration. We're alive right now, so party on. That's why we have cookies waiting for you, to cheer you up after that death talk. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope this wasn't too much of a downer. If you'd like to be on the mailing list, you can sign up in the back. I'm grateful to be able to share this time with you on Monday nights, and thank you for your support that helps to keep this going. And I hope you and your body have a wonderful night together. Enjoy the cookies. They're waiting for you.